Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to our Eventful Living program this morning here at Moravian Hall Square. And I'm Liz Brandel, I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Morningstar Living. I know many of you, but I see some faces from outside in the community, so welcome to our campus this morning. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Restrooms for the ladies is to your right as you go out here, and then past the elevator and on your left. The gents is just caddy corner to this room here. Now, if I may ask, if you have to get up and leave the room for any reason, if you could use the last door on my right, on your left, to leave. I'm going to close these doors off to avoid interruptions, if that's okay. And then another very important piece that we always like to cover, you know what's coming. Reach into your pocket or your purse or wherever you hold that thing that dings and blings and buzzes and beeps, and please turn it off. We all know the person whose phone goes off with a wonderful ringtone doesn't recognize their own ringtone. So let's see if we can just avoid any interruptions by getting them all switched off in the outset. And if your phone rings, you'll have to stand up and answer it. On speaker. Is that enough to make you switch off? Alrighty. So anyway, we're glad you can join us today. As you know, Eventful Living programs have been running now here at Moravian Hall Square for many, many years. Long before I ever came here, they were just rebranded, I believe, in 2012 as Eventful Living. But we've always provided these great educational opportunities for our own residents and for the general public. So today's seminar is A Seat at History's Table, Jefferson's Swivel Windsor Chair 250 years later. Very apt as we celebrate America's 250th anniversary. So today we're thrilled to introduce Moravian Hall Square resident and master craftsman John Holdos for a fascinating look at the iconic swivel Windsor chair used by Thomas Jefferson as he drafted the Declaration of Independence. Commissioned to create an exact replica, John will share the history, craftsmanship, and ingenuity behind this remarkable piece of early American design, offering a unique way to honor America's 250th anniversary.
Oh, good morning, Liz. How are you?
I'm well. What have you got there, John?
Well, back in 1772, us 14 cabinet makers in Philadelphia got together, and I was just speaking out there to Mr. Randolph if he had gotten any latest information on Mr. Jefferson. But we came up with a price book where we standardized our pricing, what we charged for furniture and what we paid our journeymen.
That sounds a little bit like collusion and price fixing to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was in this day and age. But we did that to, how would you say, protect ourselves and have some money. But anyway, good morning and thank you everyone for coming. Today we're going to go into a little bit of a back in time and a short history journey of the swivel chair and the making of a Windsor chair and in 1776. But before we get into the swivel Windsor chair, I'd like to go back to understand some of the information that's been published about the swivel chair and the Jefferson chair, because some of it is contradictory, and it's even contradictory up until today. The first documented, this is what we're going to be covering pretty much today in our seminar, and we'll go through it as time goes on here. So what we have here is the first known documented evidence that we have of a swivel chair, and that's from a manuscript from 1505. So you'll see that the swivel chair is not really that new. as some people claim. So this happened back then by a German nobleman by the name of Kempfberg. Now, the Windsor chair itself first originated in Windsor, England in about 1710. And the chair back then, it started out as an indoor chair. And you'll notice that it has the cabriole legs. Okay, whoops. Went a little bit too fast here, buddy. The indoor chair, the cabriole legs, okay, and the splat back, okay, those are the hallmark features of that chair design back then. It eventually evolved into an outdoor chair over there in England, and that's basically your first outdoor lawn furniture, and it was painted green. So you'll see it still had the splat back and the spindles, but the cabriole legs were taken away. So what happens then over time is that eventually it migrated here to the States or the colonies, and it evolved into what the American craftsmen made over here on our right. So you notice the English chair had the splat back. Whoop, let's see here. The splat back and the cabriole legs, where the colonial version had spindles, okay, and turned legs. It's a much more simpler design. And actually this furniture back in the 1700 was inexpensive furniture. A chair like that cost between $3 and $4, okay, and the average journeyman earned about 5 to 10 cents per day that we're making these chairs. So you can see how things have evolved over time. Here we have today's basically we're going to center around the comb-back Windsor chair. That's one of the particular designs of the Windsor chair. And it starts out, whoops, these things a little trickier than I think. Is the stretchers on the bottom. They basically stabilize the legs and keep it from splaying out, and they're usually highly turned. Then you have your seat, and you have the arm supports, and you have the spindles, okay? And then you have the upper part up here, which is pretty much the hallmark of a comb-back Windsor chair. And it gets its name from a comb-back chair because it resembles a comb. So here you have the crest rail on the top, and you'll notice it's a piece of bent wood, steam bent wood, and then the ears, whoops. Oh, jeez. Fingers are too big. I have the carved ends, okay, which is a classical mark of a comb-back Windsor chair. So, how does it all start out? Well, it all starts out as a tree in a forest, and there's bodgers out there that cut these trees down, and then they split them into logs. And those logs then eventually are cut into small sections called billets. And these billets then, you can see here, oh, jeez. Sorry. Liz, I have big fingers, are split by hand, because all of this takes place in the forest. This doesn't come back into town. This is all done out in the forest by hand, and it's all split. So these pieces then are split into small sections, which you have there, and that's straight grain. And that's green wood. You want to turn green wood rather than turning dry wood, because it's much easier to turn. Plus also that wood, when it dries out, it shrinks. And when it shrinks in the joints in the seat, it makes a much more sturdy and solid joint that you have. So how did these guys, they were called bodgers, and how did they turn these pieces in the woods? They didn't have a generator. They didn't have a gasoline engine or anything else. So what they used was called a spring pole lathe. And a spring pole lathe consists of basically a sapling up here the lathe portion itself, and a treadle. And as the bodger would press down on that treadle, it causes that turning in here to rotate. Okay? And you can see that a little bit better here on this photograph, the rope wrapped around it. So as he pressed down on the treadle, that turning would revolve towards him and downward. Okay? And this is when he put his tool in and did the cutting. Okay? As he was done with the travel on the treadle, he released the foot from the treadle. The spring pole would pull up the turning and turn it in a reverse direction, and then he would start to. So it was almost like a dance, because he was there with his foot on the treadle, moving his hands in and out of with the tool, and this is what this is what it was all about, and this was all done out in the forest. So what you have here is basically two different styles of turnings that were done out there. A bamboo style, which you see here resembles bamboo, and then you also have the baluster style, which consists of rings and vases. Okay? And it's a more ornate and delicate turning. It's not as stable as the bamboo turning, but again, this baluster style was also a distinctive thing within the colonies. Turners in one colony or one geographical area would have certain characteristics that they would put into their turnings, and vice versa in others. Yes?
That one frame, like 50 something, what's the rope attached to?
The spring pole up here at the top. Okay? And that's what causes this thing to rotate counterclockwise and clockwise as you pull down on the treadle. Sure. Oops. These fingers. Okay, the spindles on the back. The spindles on the back, on the small end there, that's shaved down to 3/8 inches in diameter. Okay? And they came in various lengths. They were made from oak, ash, or hickory. And they were basically drawn down by hand on a primitive seated thing with a spake show. You know, the guy looks a little familiar there, doesn't he? I don't know who he is. But anyway, but that was all done by hand. And that was done out in the forest. But there was also some of the spindles and were made in a shop because of the various sized chairs, because of their diameter and various other dimensions. So what they would do is had a fixture here where they use a hand plane, and they would then plane these pieces of wood down by hand to the diameter that they wanted. They also used a lathe in the shops, which is a treadle lathe, and think of it as the old treadle sewing machine. They would paddle around, or they would have a hand-cranked lathe. A young lad would stand there for hours at a time turning this thing by hand while the turner was there making the pieces. And these little tools that you have up here, on this corner up here, they basically allowed the turner in a shop to be able to turn at different diameters consistently. And therefore, you didn't have to have as skilled a craftsman, okay, making the turnings, and you had consistency on that turning over its entire length. As you'll see on that spindle, okay, it has a taper to it, okay, and then it's flared down in here, and then it has a wider base. So what they would do is they turn this at one diameter, okay, then they would come along and turn this at another diameter and then do some handwork on here to give it a taper if they were doing it in a shop on a treadle lathe. So that's pretty much it about making chairs. You don't need to know any more than that. That's the whole thing about it is this guy here, Thomas Jefferson. He was a skilled statesman and a politician, And he's our first Secretary of State, and he was the second Vice President and the third President of our country. And that was from 1801 to 1809. He was also a keen student of gardening, architecture, and mechanical devices. And he was a very creative and inventive individual. By all accounts, he was a self-contained, self-sufficient man. And like many great people, he was a massive contradiction. What you have here is a reproduction of the chair that Thomas Jefferson sat in while he drafted the Declaration of Independence in 1776. I'm going to make some contradictions to some of the information that has been published about this chair based on having made these chairs over the years and repairing antique furniture. I question what has been seen by some of these non-furniture makers and antique authorities versus the telltale evidence on this chair. How did they come to some of their conclusions? They're beyond me. Some are definitely pure assumptions and not supported by facts. Some even have their historical facts out of date. The armchair has long been of interest to historians and furniture scholars, some of whom have considered its rotating mechanism to be the original construction, and others have said that the mechanism was later modified. A history of this chair provides limited substantial clues. So what is known about the Jefferson Swivel Windsor chair? Jefferson simply called it a revolving Windsor armchair. This chair is also unique because it has 11 spindles rather than the 9 spindles. As you see here, this one has 11 on it. And that's basically because of the large diameter seat that it has. You can pull it off, Bruce. The swivel mechanism is incorporated into a double layer seat assembly with an iron post, okay, that goes down through the lower seat. Okay, put it back on there, Bruce. We're going to get into that here. Okay. Jefferson arrived in Philadelphia in 1775, and he was part of the Committee of Five that was charged with drafting the Declaration of Independence. And on that committee was John Adams, Ben Franklin, Robert Livingston, Roger Sherman, and Jefferson himself. And Jefferson was the one that was charged with writing it because of his skills as a writer. And so this document then was going to be presented in July of 1776. So in 75, Jefferson starts his residency in Philadelphia at a chairmaker by the name of Benjamin Randolph, where he resides on the second floor, and he starts drafting and having meetings with various people on this document. So back in 1776, May 14th, Jefferson arrives back in Philadelphia with a large library of reference material. And he again rents a room at Randolph's home on Chestnut Street and starts drafting the final version of the Declaration. And during this process, he comes up with a conclusion that this Windsor chair that he's sitting in, there is a fixed chair. And he's having problems accessing his reference material, writing at the desk, being able to stand up, and also Jefferson had a lower back problem. And there's no historical fact on this, but allegedly he fell from a horse when he was young, and suffered an injury, but there's no, how would you say, historical documentation to back this up. So anyway, having those issues, he decides to be an inventive person to design a swivel Windsor chair. So Tom there gets involved with this thing, and we don't know who actually made the chair. He takes the design to a chair maker in Philadelphia at the time. We don't know if it's one of Randolph's staff members at his facility. Is it Francis Trumbull or another chair maker to build this chair? So this swivel seat, as you said, enabled him to be able to move around. So during this whole process, while he's trying to write this, he finds that the noise and the squalor of the center city, Philadelphia, being unfavorable. So he decides he's going to relocate. And in this process, he moves over to the Groff House. But there's a little thing that happens in here that gets a little bit of controversy on it. Martha Washington shows up at the Randolph House while he's there. And George is supposed to arrive in another few days, and they were running out of room. So did Thomas Jefferson move over and find other accommodations because the Washingtons were coming, or did he move because of the noise and squalor of Philadelphia? That one, we're never going to know that one. So anyway, he moves over to the Groff House. Okay, the Groff House here was built in 1775, and what you're seeing here is not the original Groff House. The original Groff House was torn down in 1883. The Groff House that's there today was built in 1975 by the National Park Service as part of the bicentennial celebration. And what they wanted to do there, in an effort to recreate everything as possible, they wanted to do the furnishings. And in the furnishings of that, in the upper floor, you'll notice that here's the swivel Windsor chair and the desk that he drafted the Independence Declaration on. That desk, by the way, resides at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. So, you're probably wondering, okay, how did this chair, since it was modified and everything, how did the guy know that to recreate this thing in its entirety? So Robert Santori, Charles Santori, he was brought in. He was a Windsor chair specialist or authority, and he used the chair, the original chair, and then he used turnings from chairs that were made in Philadelphia at that time, and pieced this whole thing together to recreate what the original chair looked like. In that time frame, also then, a fellow by the name of Robert Whitley was commissioned to make the reproduction, and that's what you see in that photograph there, is the reproduction of the original chair. Now the chair itself was modified, okay? So when Jefferson leaves for Monticello, after the Declaration of Independence has been written and all, things change. Oops. Bamboo legs are put on and replace the baluster turnings. Original arm posts were out here. They're moved rearward. The arm is modified. A writing paddle is added, and paddle supports are put in here. And why this was done, when he returned to Monticello, he put the chair alongside a Windsor couch, which created basically a chase lounge for him. And since he had this lower back problem and he was suffering from rheumatism, it eased him his pain, and he was able to write on that. So this is why this chair was modified, and this is why Centauri had to come up with the original turnings for when it was at Philadelphia at the Groff House for the 1776 bicentennial. So what we have here also is that the chair over time was also changed in many other ways. These base section here, some claim that this whole base section of it here was not original, and some claim that it was. I'm a firm believer that what you have on the base section of the original chair is that it was that way, and I'm basing that on fact that down in here on both of these sides, you'll see there was originally holes in there from a chair, and they took a chair that was existing at Monticello and dismantled it and took the legs from it, which were bamboo style, which matched the bamboo style legs on that chase lounge that he had there. And the other thing about it is the telltale signs that it wasn't original is the fact the way this thing is our legs are cut off, okay? That would have been all a different color, the wear marks in here, et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of tells me that that is the original base, and the pulleys were then added at some time during the base. And why were the pulleys added? It made it easier to rotate. You'll notice that in this seat that's in front of you here, it doesn't have it. That's the way it originally was. Okay, so it will bind. It doesn't necessarily move very smoothly, which the pulleys did arrive. Some people say that how would you say, base was not invented, or even the entire chair didn't come about until 1785. And that's based upon they found some white paint on the chair when they were doing some analysis. But the white paint was found on a pulley. The white paint was not found on the chair itself. So white paint was not used until 1785. So that's where they came up with this idea that this chair wasn't conceived and built until 1785. But that's not a truth in that matter there. So you have to be careful what you're reading that these quote-unquote experts have written about this chair and what goes on with it. Here's a better close-up view. And those are basically window sash pulleys. We probably all remember when we had them and they had weights on them and the rope would break and you had to take the trim off and everything else. Well, that's nothing new. That's been around for a long time. And we have. The other thing here is there was an iron plate that was added to the bottom of the chair. Again, when was that iron plate added? That becomes rather controversial. Was it added at the same time the pulleys were put in, or was it put on afterwards because of the wear of the pulleys? You know, did it wear into the wood and then cause them to put the plate on, or vice versa? The only way to tell this is if those screws were removed from that chair and you could be able to see underneath. And I don't think that's going to happen. Nobody's going to allow that chair to be dismantled to find out that fact. The other thing that's of interest is this iron post that's here in the bottom, and there's a sleeve on it. And what you have is that sleeve there goes into this plate here. And I've got questions on that. Is when that sleeve, when was it put in there? Was it put in at the same time that the iron plate was put in? Was it put in afterwards? And I guess I'll never know that one either. They won't allow me to take that apart. So that's how this chair got modified over time when it was in Monticello, until it, and actually is even until today. So this is the chair, the way it looks right now. If you were to go to the Philosophical Society in Philadelphia and to view the chair, that's the way it is. And what we have there. So back to this chair. When, how many times was it modified? When was it modified? That's a lot of unknowns, and there's no documented history on this. Some say that the Jefferson's, how would you say, dependents or whatever, didn't treasure this chair as much as they treasured the desk that he wrote the Declaration of Independence on. And the Declaration of Independence, the desk, there's a history, a written history of it, there's documentation and all on it. This chair, since it's been modified several times from the time it was built in 1776, okay, has gone through, I say, many variations. So some historical facts aren't there to substantiate it, but also is, who's to say that his relationship or his relatives didn't really like the chair? So it's a little bit of a controversy, and this is what we have. Another controversy arises in 1836, and the chair is supposedly given to the Philosophical Society by a Judge Kane. But the problem that you have in here is, again, historical facts. The chair gets willed to Jefferson's daughter, Martha Jefferson Randolph, who then Kane alleges that she gave it to him directly. But really that didn't happen. She gives the chair to a daughter, and she inherits this chair in 1836. And she's married to a guy by the name of Nicholas Thirst. And Thirst is a friend of Judge Kane. Okay? And then Judge Kane is the guy that we're talking about here, donates it to the Philosophical Society. So there's a step in between there that Judge Kane doesn't tell anybody about. So what he does and says when he donates the chair to the Philosophical Society is, I beg leave to entrust to the care of the Society a writing chair used by Mr. Jefferson at Philadelphia while preparing the Declaration of Independence. At the close of the congressional labors of 1776, he carried it with him to Virginia, and after his death, it was carefully preserved by his family with a few other personal memorials. His daughter, the late Mrs. Randolph, did me the honor to present to me some 18 months ago, and it is through her that I became acquainted with this chair in history. It is a plain, old-fashioned Windsor armchair with a circular back, a writing leaf or table fixed upon its right arm, and the body of the chair revolves around a pivot. It has been repaired since it came into my possession, but without changing its form in any respect. So this is what you have here, and some of the controversy that's happened over time with historical facts. And you've got to be very, very careful, and I got caught up in it early on too, and doing the research on this over how many years? About almost 30 years here, Betty, of doing this research on this chair, and this is what you have. So you wonder, how did I ever get involved with this chair? Well, in 1997, I spent a year apprentice with Robert Whitley, who's the one that made the reproduction that's at the Groff House today. And in that time period, I had access to the drawings that Santor and Whitley had made for making the reproduction. And so that chair that you see right here, I made that in 97, and that's my wife's Christmas present that I gave to her in 1997. She has some interesting ties to historical and ties to that chair. She's a member of the Daughters of American Revolution. Okay, her great-great-grandfather, Christian Holland, he was a corporal in the militia during the Revolutionary War. He was also a nailsmith in Easton, and he was also a tax collector there for a short period of time during that period. Another interesting fact is that he lived on Pomfret Street, now South 3rd Street in Easton. And his next-door neighbor was George Taylor, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. So I can see where I have some personal ties with this, through her. In 1998, I was commissioned to make some chairs for a presidential display that toured the United States for several years. And in that display, I was fortunate enough to make two of the chairs. One is the Swivel Windsor chair that you see here, and the other chair over here is Franklin Delano Roosevelt's wheelchair. The interesting fact on this was the fact that the wheelchair that Franklin Delano Roosevelt used, that's the only photograph that there is known of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in a wheelchair. And that was taken for an Easter Seal campaign. And that little girl that's with her there, it's Ruthie Bai, and she was a caretaker's daughter up at Hyde Park at that point in time. So there's a little bit closer view of the chair. That arrangement was displayed. It was reconfigured in different configurations for different events. There's a little thing over here. That's a president's podium. I know you've probably seen him standing at something like that over time. Well, we also had the honor of making a reproduction of that, and that's a story unto itself, and so is the making of the wheelchair. When you get involved with that pedestal, I had the unfortunate, how would you say, opportunity to deal with the Secret Service and had to get President Ford involved with it so I could get some of the information that I needed. So I've made a contemporary version of this Swivel Windsor chair for customers. This one here is made out of cherry, and you'll notice that I've changed the design on it. There's simpler legs and all, but the concept is the same. The swivel mechanism that's in the bottom of these chairs is a huge Lazy Susan arrangement with ball bearings and all on it, so it glides and turns very easily. So the first version that I made of this contemporary chair, I wound up giving it to an engineer up at MIT, Draper's Lab. He's a nuclear engineer up there. And he had developed polio when he was 11 years old, and he was physically disabled. He was almost like a big brother to me. So anyway, he did the math on the chair that I gave him, and we compared it to my crude way of making the chair, and he did all of the math, and I have copies of the math over here that he did. And the final conclusion was that he said, he says, you were darn close, he says, in what you did. And consider the chair maker back in 1776 and the bodger that turned these pieces out in the forest and drilling holes by hand and using his eye. They made some fantastic furniture and probably will outlast some of the furniture that's made today with sophisticated equipment and with all of this math. So, what else do we got here? Well, this chair here in particular, we were kind of fortunate in 2000. It was used as a prop in an off-Broadway play called Rush's Dream, and that was between Jefferson and Adams, and was there. And currently the chair resides in our apartment, and eventually it's going to be donated to the George Taylor Museum here in Easton. I no longer make the chair, but there are several chair makers that still offer it. So if anybody's interested, the cost is usually around $2,000 per chair. So if anybody's interested, it's out there. So thank you for coming, and hope you enjoyed the presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I know I had one other question before. I'll address that as well. Liz, what do you got?
All righty. What a wonderful seminar. We certainly learned a lot today for sure. So we appreciate that. Now, does anybody have any questions for John? If you just let me bring the microphone.
Sure. Were there ever any modifications to the paddle to accommodate the left-handed rider?
No. Not that I know of anyway. I mean, it would be easy enough to do, I mean, had you want to make a reproduction of it, but it would take a little bit of work, yeah. The other one that I had earlier on, somebody asked me about the paint finish that's on there. That's milk paint. That was a very common finish, a very inexpensive paint finish back in that time, and that consisted of milk, lime, and pigment, and it was a mixture, and it was put on, and primarily the colors were an off red to a blackish color. There were a few that were painted green that I was able to find in historical records, but most of them were done in a reddish finish to a black and all. The interesting thing about milk paint is that the wood being porous and the chemicals in the casein in the milk and the lye in it penetrates into the wood. Okay, it makes it very, very difficult to refinish. It's almost impossible to do. And talking with the conservators down at Winterthur, the DuPont Museum, they've even experimented using bacteria because it's an organic type paint to remove the milk paint. And they've had some success and not, but it's a very, very difficult paint to refinish. So a lot of times when the furniture is made using milk paint, you wind up just painting over it, period. You don't really take the finish that's on there off.
Good. Any other questions? Wow, that's unusual. You must have covered so much
one
ground.
for you folks. And sometimes people have been down in Monticello, okay, and seen that chair, and it's been peddled off as being the chair that Thomas Jefferson used when he drafted the Declaration of Independence. And that's not so. That chair there was made in 1790, okay? And it does swivel, okay? But that is not the chair that Jefferson used when he drafted the Declaration of Independence. So again, be careful what you read and what you see, okay? And I got caught into this. Betty and I got caught in this at a museum with a curator there, and she claimed that that was the chair that was used, and I says, no, you're incorrect. So again, be careful what you read, and if you have any other question, go ahead.
Jefferson's family, well, Jefferson died intestate, right? Because he was totally broke.
Yeah.
So it's a wonder they were able to trace any of this stuff. You think the family was selling off these pieces hand over fist to make up for the debt, and which was never made up because he had to sell his human beings at that time too.
Correct.
So I wondered how you traced these things.
Oh, a lot of it was just little fragments here and there over the years. And I can't tell you how many hours that I've spent just a tidbit here, a tidbit there, and trying to extract this whole thing. And that's the interesting about the chair, as we said before. The chair was given to Thirst, okay, and then to Cain. Okay, so it takes a step in between there. And that's part of what you have going on, what you're talking about, and how some of this stuff was disposed. So it's very, very difficult because there's just not a lot of it that's written about and recorded.
Alrighty, one more question over here.
Oh.
Hold on. Come to you, Bonnie.
Johnny, I'm hoping that you do one on the Franklin Delano Roosevelt chair because I love that story that you were telling me. And also, they seem so, Jefferson was so tall, and some of the legs seem short on some of these chairs. And to me, it seems like he would be uncomfortable in some of them.
Well, what
with his
happened is
legs.
the chair originally had legs of that size on it, okay, which would accommodate him. So when they took the chair back to Monticello after 1776, okay, that's when they modified it, okay, and cut the legs down. So it accompanied this like a sofa. So what he was able to do is he was able to sit in it with his legs sprung out, okay, and he had the writing arm there that he could write on. So his feet actually only touched, how would you say, the floor. When he got sat into it, then he rotated his legs upwards, okay, and that eliminated his back pain and vice versa. So that's how these short legs came about. And that's why, as you notice, this leg that's here, if you try and cut that down, it's not a very sturdy piece of wood, okay, because of the turnings. And the bamboo is style. And plus, the legs that were on that adjoining sofa were of a bamboo style. So then it blended together. So that's how that all comes about there. Go.
John, with FDR's wheelchair, the one that you reproduced, how were you able to get the full design based on that one photograph?
Okay. We had the good fortune. There were 4 of those chairs that were made. It was a kitchen set that was down in Warm Springs, Georgia, where he was. And there was a local handyman down there that took those 4 kitchen chairs and took the legs off of them, okay, and cobbled together a metal frame out of angle iron and wheelchair parts. Okay, so that's how the chair originally came about. I had the good fortune when I was commissioned to make this to go up to Hyde Park to Roosevelt's home up there, and 2 of those 4 chairs reside up in the home up there. One is in the room where he did the fireside chat. Okay, the other one was in a dumbwaiter over in the home. So what the Park Service did, they allowed Betty and I to go in and measure and photograph one of those original chairs. And while we were there, a Park Service ranger stayed with us the entire time. They did not allow us to be alone with this chair. The interesting thing about it, take a step backward, that chair, when it was over in the home, was displayed in a dumbwaiter. And that's how FDR went from one floor to the next. He would go inside this dumbwaiter, okay, and sit on, wheel himself in. And then there were ropes in there, and he would pull himself up from one floor to the next to get out. Because the upper part of FDR's body, he was built like a prize fighter. He was just super strong. I mean, his leg and shoulder muscles and everything else. But there's also an interesting story with President Clinton. He was up there one day on display. And as you know, the Secret Service, the president has to be always in view of somebody in the Secret Service. Well, Clinton decides to go inside the dumbwaiter, okay, sit on the chair, and pull himself from one floor to the next. And the Secret Service lost sight of him. Well, they said that was a real commotion that day. I don't know. But what had happened there then, in building that chair, I had to take everything from the photographs and the dimensions that Betty and I were able to do there. And the other thing was kind of interesting. Right at the very end, the Park Service rangers asked Betty and I if we wanted to sit in the wheelchair, okay? And both of us refused. I just couldn't do it. You just have that feeling, I'm not going to sit in it, I'm not going to break it, I don't want to touch it. But they were very, very accommodating in doing that. So that's how that all came about. So it's basically reverse engineered. And the parts, the wheelchair parts, were kind of interesting because I could not find an old wheelchair of that style to be able to, cannibalize to use the parts. So I had to reverse engineer the castings. So I had them, I drew them up and had a machinist make me the metal parts, and we welded them all together and then bead blasted them so they looked like a casting. And then we had a wheel maker in New Jersey, a bicycle, a high-wheeler bicycle maker, contacted him and gave him the drawings of the size of the wheels that we wanted, and then he made them for us. And then the swivel mechanism that was all basically made by hand with pieces machined and bolted and all together to duplicate the wheelchair. So it was quite that was probably almost a 1 year experience there between getting all of the information and doing it. And that was the same thing with the podium for the president. They asked me if I'd make that. And that was no problem. I mean, can you give me some dimensions? No. Okay. Where can I get some dimensions? You can't? Well, okay, the only place you can is use it off of photographs or something, which I tried. I got close. And then I told the people that commissioned me to make this, I said, I'm having some problems. And they says, maybe we'll get, in the process here, the Secret Service was not allowing me access to any of the technical information that I was looking for. And this was right after 9/11. So you can understand why they were reluctant on giving me some information. So in the process, finally get in touch with President Ford, and he says, no problem. He says, I'll get you the information that you need. Okay, fine, thank you. Next thing you know, I do get a document from the Secret Service that has some dimensions on it. And I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden, things start to look a little strange. Why does this thing have these huge handholds on either side of it? Okay? A podium of that size would not necessarily have to have handholds of this size. Okay, so I start questioning a little bit. Here this dang thing is armor plated. Okay? And it's an open cavity on the back side of it. So what it is, the president, in case of emergency situation, can duck behind this, and 4 Secret Service agents, 2 on each side, grab a hold of these handholds, okay, and they will walk then the president hiding behind this off the stage or wherever he's at. So it's you can see why some of the information they were reluctant to share. and all at that time. But yeah, it's when you start getting involved with some of this stuff, it's just so interesting. So what you see is face value, and what's behind all of it, it's another story. And it's been interesting. I've had some interesting times, in making furniture. And we've been asked to make furniture for, they wanted me to make the Lincoln's desk that's in the White House, and I just didn't have the time to do that and all. And there's, what was some of the other things up at the mansion up in, oh boy. No, up in north of Stroudsburg, Milford, Gray Towers. Then when they were restoring that, and it was, again, they just had so much that they wanted, I just couldn't do it. I was a one-man shop, and you can only do so many things. Plus, I had other customers, and all I did was make custom furniture. I didn't make furniture of mass production. Everything was a one-of-a-kind and all. So that's where we're at. So any other questions?
Excellent. Any other questions? Nope, I think we're good. Well, please, again, thank you, John. We appreciate you sharing your talent and your passion for history. And thank you all for coming out this morning. If you haven't had a copy of our Eventful Living catalogue, there's a copy there if you wish to help yourself. And I know we did have to reschedule one of the January programs, the Journey of the Liberty Bell, coming to Allentown. We are hoping to reschedule that in March or early April. So that will go out in various ways to you to get that message out. And if you did sign up for that program before, you'll get an email saying that your reservation has been transferred to the new date. Alrighty. So thank you again, John. We appreciate you.
Got one other thing for you. What we have here, this document here is a reproduction of the draft that Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1776, and you'll see that it's marked up. That was what was marked up by the Continental Congress, okay, and then eventually published. And I don't know if you're well aware of it, but in 1776, on July 8th, the Declaration of Independence was read here in Easton, and it was read in English and German. Okay, because of the bilingual community that was here. And then a few days later, it was published in a local newspaper in German as well. So, but come up and feel free to come up and take a seat in here if you want and see how it spins.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for coming out, everyone. Thank you.